Hi! So, two things before we start this Q&A. Firstly, this video will not be scripted. I'll just be reading the questions and answering the first thing that pops to my mind. And secondly, did you know that I've started streaming again over on Twitch? So if you aren't following me yet, follow me there. I usually stream in the evenings, not every day, not regularly, but if you follow, you'll be notified when I do. And we stream all sorts of things, but also SpellForce. So if you're interested, go hit me up there. In any case, we've got a lot of questions for today, and I'm still not sure what sort of background I want for this. In the first Q&A, I used some sort of SpellForce gameplay, I think it was SpellForce 1. And for this one, I could do a similar thing with either SpellForce 1 or SpellForce 2, but I'm feeling a little bit spicy. So we'll just use some Gothic 1 footage that I have on my PC, because I'm lazy, and that's easy to do. The first couple of questions are from my Discord, and we'll start with Rototom, who asks, if I would be able to add any of the minor races, so Skurks, Beastmen, Ogres, etc. as a playable faction, which one would I choose, and what would their racial power be? Honestly, I probably would have to go with Beastmen here, only because we already kinda have Beastmen in SpellForce 2, and I always wanted them to be a playable race. Now, as for what sort of racial power they would have, this could be a twofold question. One could be the racial powers like you have them in SpellForce 1 for each race, and one could be just what the race excels at. If we're going with what the race excels at, I would assume beasts would be very quick, very, just rushy. Just rush your opponent with them. If we went the SpellForce 1 route, maybe something similar even to the trolls, where they would just get stronger in battle, or some sort of like they get angry or something, they're beasts after all. And that gives them some sort of extra power up, but that might be a bit not unique enough. Honestly, I'm very bad at thinking of these powers, but yeah, something in that general direction. The next question is from Kesh, and he asks, how much do different races interact with each other in daily life, as in outside of war? Like, I imagine light races trade, study and cooperate on many occasions as seen in game, but do Norcane, orcs, even trolls, goblins, whatever else do that? So would you be able to get imported Dark Elven pottery in 7 Keeps? And for 2, how does faith work with different races? Like, Neathalf is mostly associated with dwarves, but as a god of craftsmen and warriors, other races seem to pay attention to him. And black magic practitioners, mostly human, sometimes referred to Nor also, so could you find some sort of shrine of Nor, most likely underground since it's far from popular religion, in other countries, or of Neathalf in Shal? Now, let's do one question at a time. The first one, yes, races do in fact interact with each other. The light races, very much so. In the lore, the light races sort of have this interaction thing going ever since the War of the Six Races, where humans and dwarf will be very tightly connected in a lot of ways, especially like trading and even defending each other. The elves are a bit more isolated there, but that also stems from the fact that they live far in the south of Fiora, and the humans and the dwarves were already kind of tightly intertwined ever since the dwarves discovered the humans. After the War of the Six Races, it just became a bit more, a bit more intense on that side, while the elves, yeah, they aren't enemies of humans and dwarves, and they wouldn't fight them or anything, because they were allies at one point, and elves still kind of communicate with them. For example, we have the elves of Iloni, or of Leafshade, but yeah, they definitely have good relations in the trade. Now, the dark races are a bit more complicated, and I'd say a bit more interesting when it comes to that. The Norcane would like sort of trades and things like that, but I feel like compared to humans, elves and dwarves, all of the dark races are a bit more independent on that front. They don't really prefer to trade with the other ones, because the dark races don't even really like each other that much. Like, sure, the Norcane hate the humans, elves and dwarves a lot more than they would hate the orcs. They've had conflicts after the War of the Six Races, because the only thing that was keeping them together then, as sort of allies, were the Fjaldark, while nowadays they just kind of look, after their own things. So yeah, I don't generally think that Dark Elves would import pottery into 7 Keeps. It might be possible, but I feel like just from what we know from the Norcane, that they just hate humans, hate the light worshippers. Not all of them, of course, but the vast majority, and they consider them weak. I don't really see them trying to have any sort of trade with them. Same for the orcs. And the humans aren't too keen on doing that either. Now, trolls, goblins, whatever else, I just don't think that those are generally on an intellectual level where they would consider trading. They are very much relying on their instincts and just kind of living in the moment and with the things they have and that they can make themselves. But trading isn't really something that they would be doing, at least not in my opinion. And as for 2, so fates in SpellForce, you pointed out something very interesting and very good here, that different races, or more specifically, a race isn't locked to a particular faith. So you can worship whoever you want. Now, if there's any repercussions for that, for example, if humans worship some, I don't know, Zarah or Nur, one of the renegades, they might not be looked upon as nicely, because most humans just simply don't do that. Compare that to, it might not be the best comparison, but in real life, people who practice Satanism or something like that, like, yeah, you can do it. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily a bad person, but people will just look at you a bit, you know, a bit down on you in general. But I can definitely imagine, and there are examples of this, of humans worshipping either the renegades or, for example, demons. Shin-Tag-Wa comes to mind from Greyfell, who even sacrificed his sons to the Red Horde and worshipped them as a sort of god. But yeah, it definitely exists, and there's definitely examples of it. And the same for like the Dark Elves who worship Neathalf, the Drakon, more specifically. But yeah, it exists, and it's not as prevalent as one might think, but it definitely exists. As for shrines, well, there might be shrines, and shrines are technically allowed. If you think to Imperia and the shrines they had there for all the Guardians, they had a messenger of Nor, the ambassador of Nor, the Norcane there. So they do allow it. It's not like they would just outright kill the people that do that, but it's just not something that a lot of people enjoy doing, and it very much depends on the situation. I feel like humans are a bit more open to that, compared to orcs or dark elves especially. I don't think the dark elves would let any humans, you know, worship anyone in their cities, but the opposite can happen in some cases, as we can see in Imperia. Bubbed890 asks, what is my opinion on how the Red God cult arc and the Portal Crisis would have been explored and resolved? So, we know from Dragonstorm and from the SpellForce 2 free game mode that the Red God cult arc whole thing and the Portal Crisis would have been the big 2 plot points following the story of Dragonstorm. We already have the start of that in both the game and free game mode. And as for how I think it would be resolved, the Portal Crisis one is easy to answer. The game heavily implies, or basically straight up says it, that Twiddle would be responsible for that in the future. At what point, we don't know, but at a general, I don't know, like maybe give it a couple of years, 5 to 10 years, the Portal thing would be resolved and the Portal network would be restored, so we don't have this whole issue of needing external tools like dragons or something to go from island to island. As for the Red God cult, I do believe that it would be a very big conflict, spanning across a lot of parts of EO, because if you think back to when the demons first started appearing on EO, the Guardians had to step in and collapse the Mountain Bargagor to kind of keep them at bay, so they just wouldn't overrun everything straight up. And yeah, with that in mind, it would be a big conflict, but I do think it would be somehow resolved without the need for the Guardians to intervene again, because Dragonstorm made a big point with its story, and at least a story for the arcs to follow, that the people of EO, the races of EO, are supposed to find solutions to these issues out of their own power. So they shouldn't use the Archfire, they shouldn't rely on the Guardians, they need to find ways to do it themselves. And I feel like that's a direction it would have gone into had we have gotten another add-on. Sora283 asks, of all the races you can play in SpellForce 1 and 2, what do you think are the strong points of each? What advantages do they have over other races? And lastly, what is my favorite race? So I'll get my favorite race out of the way. I'm a big fan of the dwarves. I don't know, something about them just speaks to me. I just like their gameplay. They are very, you know, stumpy visually, but also very fun to play as, very tanky. They have a lot of cool units, and you might argue that they're not the most diverse race, but yeah, I still like them. Now, I'd say humans, or the realm, even in SpellForce 2, have a very big strong point of being diverse, being able to do a lot of things, from ranged, melee, magic. They're not really the best at anything, outside of a few situations, but they have a very good balance, you know, of everything they can offer. The elves, obviously good on range, good with CC, with ice magic. The dwarves, tanky, like I said, but they also, the thing is, they also have a lot of range options. It's just not as good as the other races. Dark elves are sort of, in my opinion, similar to the humans in the fact that they have very strong fighters, but they also have very strong ranged fighters. In their case, it's only mages, they don't really have archers, but yeah, they still bring something to that. Orcs, I've never really been a fan of melee fighters when it comes to orcs. I feel like their magic can be really good, especially if you stack it. And it's not to say that their melee fighters are bad, I've just never really been too keen on them. So I'd say their strong point is mostly the magic, and the trolls are just very in your face, straight up just melee, you know, overwhelm you with power, overwhelm you with more HP, and crush everything like that. But you can see that all the races have something to offer in every single aspect. Even the trolls have ranged attackers, so yeah. But when it comes to strong points, that would be at least my opinion on it. Panmarada asks, what would I change in the game as a mechanic, and what would I maybe add or remove? This is actually something I've been thinking about a lot. One thing I would probably add into SpellForce 1 specifically would be ranged weapons for mages, like they exist in SpellForce 2, because SpellForce 1 sort of has this issue where mages tend to run into battles, and if you don't use spells, they just don't do anything. And sure, you should use spells on them, but it's just something so you don't have to micromanage it as much. That's something I would add. I would also maybe try to add... That's just something I've been thinking about, but maybe add less runes, fewer runes, but make the runes more impactful, and maybe even add some sort of quests connected to the rune warriors you can summon. Because at the end of the day, the rune warriors, the rune heroes you have, are the same as you just control them because you have their rune. So it will be interesting to see something like that, maybe as a game mechanic. I'm not even sure if that classifies as a game mechanic, but I'd like to see it happen. Maybe something I'd remove. Now that's tricky, I don't really think I'd remove anything. There's nothing that really comes to mind that strikes me as bad or something I don't want to have. So I'm gonna have to pass on that one. If something comes to mind, I'll bring it up in a future video, but for now, everything's good. Now Grand Autismo asks, what is my opinion on Palestine? A very different type of question, and since I don't know what exactly is happening there, I don't really feel I'm in a position to comment on that. So yeah, that's my opinion on it basically. V6 asks, what's my favorite school of magic in SpellForce? Now, favorite is sort of a difficult thing to answer as well, because there's two things. It can be favorite because it's very strong, or it can be favorite because it's just fun to play with. Very strong, I'd have to think elemental magic. My favorite altogether would probably have to be mental magic though, because it's so... I feel like it's underrated, and yes, mental magic in the games, at least in SpellForce 1, is very weak in a lot of areas compared to other types of magic. But I just always liked it. I liked the fact that you can damage people with the power of like using their intellect against them and stuff like that. So thematically, I'd say mental magic. And I also feel mental magic in real life would be super broken. Ashley asks, what's my favorite character build? And do I have any favorite mods or ones that I would recommend? Now, my favorite character build would probably... Not easy to answer. My favorite character build would probably have to be a mental archer. There's just something to it. I just like playing it. I like archery, I like mental magic, and I like the combination. Another thing that I like to play with is, when you go to Shadow of the Phoenix, is using staffs. So in SpellForce 2 as well, using staffs to play. I just feel like staffs are very cool as weapons, so it'd probably have to be one of those two. But I'm generally a person who prefers hybrid builds over pure ones. And do I have any favorite mods or ones I'd recommend? Now, I'm a person who generally tries to play games vanilla. I do use mods for some games in some situations, but my favorite experience is more often than not the vanilla one. That's the case with SpellForce at least. I'm not saying mods are bad, mods can be very good and they can add to the game experience. I just feel like a lot of the mods that change too much are not really my cup of tea. You know, I do play them from time to time, but it's not something I'll go back to. With that being said, there are a lot of mods, and I'll bring this up in another question afterwards, but there are a lot of mods available that kind of rehaul the whole campaign. I think there's like 2 or 3 of them. So I would take a look at those if you're looking for something that like changes the campaign a lot. Kesh asks, what's my favorite type of magic and weapon type in each game, and it can be per expansion too. So for magic, again, mental magic. In every single expansion, I just feel like it's thematically pretty cool. And weapon type, again, probably staffs. Maybe not so much in SpellForce 1, but in SpellForce 2, I was always a very big staff player. I don't know why, I just love the way they handle, I love some of the spells you get with them, and I just love how it feels to use them, basically. Gunnar asks, what are my favorite video games besides SpellForce? Now, besides SpellForce, I'd probably have to say my favorite video games would be something like Gothic. I'm a very big fan of Gothic. I'm a very big fan of the Metal Gear series as well, and of the Nier series. The Nier series, actually, I'm streaming on Twitch right now these days, so if you want to check that out, you can go there to do that. But yeah, those would probably be my big three, so like SpellForce, Gothic, Metal Gear, and Nier. I'm also a very big fan of the Monster Hunter games, so I'd have to rank those very highly. But yeah, it's hard to, like, SpellForce is my clear number 1, but it's hard to define a number 2 or 3. They're all fairly close. Anyuska asks, I hope I pronounced that right, what do I see in store for the future of my channel? New games or old tricks perhaps? Well, you see, for the future of my channel, and I've tried a couple of things out at this point, I just want to make content that's fun for me. SpellForce is always fun for me, so I like making videos about it. If at some point I decide I want to make something else, perhaps maybe for a different game, one of my other favorite games, like I mentioned earlier, I might do it, you know, it's not out of the question, but I don't really have any defined plans for anything that happens afterwards. So yeah, for the time being, probably just SpellForce videos, you know, doing tricks, getting more people into SpellForce, and with Conquest of EO that's coming, we're gonna have some content to cover there as well, so I don't think I'm gonna run out of SpellForce content at any point soon, but yeah, anything might happen. Jakub asks, is there any idea for the skin you'd like to add to the game for a certain character? Now, when I first read this question, I wasn't sure if you mean a skin for like a SpellForce character, or if you mean a skin for a League of Legends character, because I do play a lot of League of Legends, so I'll just answer both. For League of Legends, as a Jinx main, I just want Jinx skins. You know, any skin for Jinx is a good skin in my opinion. And for SpellForce, I don't know. I don't even know how skins would work. Like, just maybe making a character entirely different. I don't know, I just can't think of any skin for a SpellForce character that I'd like to see in the game. I feel like the games are just, they look fine as they are, so yeah, no concrete answer there, sadly. Cheaper12 Effect asks, would I play SpellForce with viewers? I would play SpellForce 1 and 2 multiplayer with viewers if there's interest in it, perhaps even free game mode, even though you are limited to 3 people there. But yeah, I would definitely play that if we can organize something a bit bigger. It doesn't really have to be a tournament or anything, but just playing here and there. Yeah, sure, why not? You can always join my Discord, link is below, and yeah, we'll see what we can do on that front. Solid Frost asks me 3 questions actually. First one, SpellForce 1, SpellForce 2, or SpellForce 3? I am very much even when it comes to me liking SpellForce 1 and SpellForce 2. I don't really have a favorite. I like them both equally, and I know that's a boring thing to say, but since I play SpellForce mainly for the story, I just like both of them, and there's not something I prefer. Now, there might be me, like I could say that I maybe prefer Shadow Wars to Breath of Winter, or I might prefer the Order of Dawn to Shadow Wars, but then I prefer Dragonstorm to one of those, but it's not really to the degree where I would classify it as a liking one more than the other. It's just both pretty much the same. And as for SpellForce 3, I don't like SpellForce 3. I feel like that's a very well-known fact at this point, but I don't think SpellForce 3 is a good game in either gameplay or story, at least in my opinion, and yeah, no opinion on that. Now, question number 2 is my favorite weapon in each series, and I could just say staffs again, but I feel like that's cheating a bit. Well, you are saying for each series. I'll have to say for SpellForce 1, my favorite weapon, and that's not because it's a useful weapon, but my favorite weapon would have to be the Titan Hammer that Naomi sells you. It's garbage, the stats are shit, but I just feel like it's cool how, you know, they implemented a character that can just con you basically into buying very shitty weapons and gear. So that would be it for SpellForce 1. And for SpellForce 2, my favorite weapons probably have to be the crystal weapons. Either the crystal weapons from Shadow Wars, or Craig Unshalach's weapons that you get towards the end of Dragonstorm, because I just feel like they're super iconic. And the third question is, if, a very big if, I had to choose between a reworked SpellForce 1 and 2 with the Unreal Engine 5 and a SpellForce MMORPG, which one would I go for? That's a very tricky question, actually, because I see pros and cons to doing all of them. Now, the thing is, as much as I would like to see a SpellForce MMORPG, I do know that the MMORPG market is very saturated, oversaturated even, with so many games that are coming out with huge budgets and they still flop. So I feel like it's a very risky thing to go into the MMORPG market. Back when SpellForce was developed, there were, well, virtually no or very, very few MMORPGs, so it may have worked then. But today, without a huge budget and people behind it who know what they're working on and who know what they're doing, I would stay away from that. So I'd have to say a reworked SpellForce 1 and 2 with Unreal Engine 5. Something that stays true to the game, maybe some quality of life changes just with a new engine and, you know, potentially some new content added to as well. But just something that can run good on new systems and that can introduce more new people to the series. Arthwen Lionheart asks, what is my favorite and least favorite campaign in the series? And also, do I think we'll ever see Håkan Ashir in any of the new SpellForce games, like Conquest of Io or any future games? Now, for my favorite game, it'll probably have to be Dragonstorm, and even though many people might not say, Dragonstorm might not give the same answer, it just has so many references, so many connections to the previous games that came before it, that it's basically a love letter that Phenomic gave its fans with so many different things before they were sold off to EA. So it just has such it's so enjoyable to play it for me, basically. That's why I'd have to pick it. And for my least favorite, this is very hard, because there's not really a least favorite. I like all of the SpellForce campaigns, but yeah, I'd say least favorite maybe Breath of Winter, but not because it's bad. I feel like Breath of Winter, it's a good game, but just judging by the pros some of the other campaigns have, I would maybe have to say Breath of Winter. But that's, again, not to say that I don't like it. I do love Breath of Winter, but yeah, you're making me choose here. And as for Håkan Ashir, yeah, definitely. I feel like Håkan is such an iconic character for the series, one of the more recognizable circle mages, probably the second most recognizable after Rowan, that if we have a game like Conquest of Io that takes place in the past, we should definitely see Håkan in some sort of capacity. We already know that Conquest of Io is going to deal with us bumping heads with the circle mages, so I wouldn't be surprised to at least have a mention of Håkan, if not just have him straight up as a character in the game. Kuba Volvio asks, what are the future plans related to my channel, and if I don't have any, how did my adventure with SpellForce start? How did it all begin? Well, for the future parts of the channel, for the channel part, I've already answered that, so I'll just take the second question here. My adventure with SpellForce started around 2003 or 2004. My cousin was in Germany to just, visit some family, and when he came back, he brought a game with him. That was SpellForce The Order of Dawn. And yeah, I just loved playing that game. I played the shit out of it and was very bad at the start, because back then I didn't know German, so I didn't really know what the game wanted of me, but I just enjoyed playing it regardless. And then as the years went on, I just kept playing that. I got Breath of Winter, eventually Shadow of the Phoenix, SpellForce 2, and all of that. And yeah, I've just been playing those games ever since like 2003, early 2004. And yeah, then eventually I decided to make a YouTube channel, and here we are. And the final question for this Q&A comes from Mixmaster1990. What is, in my opinion, the best SpellForce 1 mod available after all the Nexus mods were deleted? Yeah, I'd probably have to say one of the overhaul mods, but it's difficult for me to say because I haven't really played through everything in any of them. So like from The Order of Dawn to Shadow of the Phoenix. But yeah, there were some good mods. I remember from Angel Trump on Nexus mods that would just slightly alter the gameplay and make it a bit better. And I like those mods, but I'm not sure if they're available anymore. So yeah, it'd probably have to be one of the big rehaul, overhaul mods, but which one's my favorite, I can't really say, and which one would be your favorite, well, that's something you just kind of have to figure out by playing them and, you know, getting to see for yourself. But in any case, that's all the questions for today. I would like to give a big thanks to everyone who asked them. I had a blast answering them, and I love communicating like this. So at the next milestone, which will be, I don't know, maybe 5k subs, if we ever get there, I'll make another Q&A, and then we can chat a bit more in this me chatting, you sort of just listening setup. But in any case, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. If you have maybe any other questions that I didn't answer here, just leave them in the comments below. And don't forget, I'm streaming on Twitch. Link is in the description. I want to see you there. Thanks again for being here, and have a nice day.